Welcome, I'm Darren and I'll be your guide today as I look at the Pinnacle Zenith cards for football. Now, Pinnacle Zenith came out of kind of a reevaluation that Score Pinnacle had done following 1994 when they realized they had to make a major shift for 95 for heading into the mid-years of the 90s. And what they realized was they couldn't go on just making standard cards like they'd been doing. They'd been doing sport flicks and that was kind of fun, but that was like for kids. They wanted to do some really high-end stuff, and so they created 3 sets that were all built to cover different aspects of higher-end cards. Select Certified was designed to be a really flashy and very kind of exotic card. And they made Summit, which was designed to be a high-level card with a parallel to it. But for just making one card that was just a really, really special high-end card, kind of that one card that was kind of ideal for each player, they made Zenith. And so Zenith was a set that was built not on a parallel, which the other 2 had been. They wanted this card to really stand alone. And like Select Certified, but unlike Summit, they were able to keep Zenith going for all 3 years in football. Probably would have continued into 1998. We just never got to see what they were going to put out in that year. So Zenith was able to be able to sustain itself. And it was not a natural process for that. They had to kind of work at it a little bit. Now, the set that they designed is pretty much the same set that they would use all 3 years. Although, like I said, they did make some variations. But they had a main set, they had rookies in the set, but these weren't actual rookie cards. These were looking back at the previous year's rookies, even though they said rookie. So this is more like the end of the previous year as opposed to the particular year that we see it as. These cards, in a way, are kind of like a nod to the way that rookies were done in the 70s and 80s, where it was a yearbook-like approach. So even though these cards say rookie, they're not rookies. But they also built the set in the same way in terms of the inserts, where they had 3 insert sets. One of them was Rookie Roundups, another one was Z-Team, and then the third one was just not one of those other 2. And every year they had the same thing. They always had a Rookie Roundup, they always had a Z-Team, and they always had a 3rd insert. So in that way, it's very similar, and we'll be seeing how that works. But otherwise, the card sets, they made slight variations, but were able to continue making basically the same Zenith card every year, which is a pretty cool achievement that they made. For the first year, 1995, they made a card that was very thick, kind of like a flare card. It was highly lacquered, again, like a flare card, but totally unlike Flare. This was a black card with gold down at the bottom that is actually, it's a top-down view of a pyramid. The card set's named Zenith, but this is also Pinnacle. And so it is the zenith of the pinnacle, and the whole idea of having a pyramid was, it kind of made sense, but it's kind of strange to look at a top-down view of a pyramid. You could also look at it as a pile of gold bricks, but a pyramid is actually the theme. And so it's a top-down view where you have 3 sides lit, and then the top side is basically the bottom end of the black area that drops down. So the player is largely surrounded by black. And with the high contrast colors that the player has, he really stands out well on these cards. They look really good. They're not flashy cards. They don't jump out. They don't make their own statement. But if you just want a really nice card, that's what they were designing with this. So while the card itself isn't as well designed as it could be, it's actually a really good card designed for 1995. The card backs, on the other hand, unfortunately are really terrible. I mean, these are Score-like backs, and they're not even as good as Score. I don't have any idea what they were going with for it, but that's kind of what they threw back there. The rookie cards in the set, like I said, again, this is 1995, but you'll notice that it's 1994 rookies. These cards were designed in a less imaginative way. So basically, it's a black strip down one side, and then it's a picture of the player in a gold tone with a cutout of the player from the same picture kind of superimposed on the front. So there's almost like a little bit of an echo of the player. And that's pretty much the card design. It's not all that exotic, but they were trying to figure out how this stuff works. So the main cards looked really good. The last year's rookies, not so much. They also had 3 record breakers, and with these record breakers, these were actually much better designed. They did a really good job with photo selection, and then down at the bottom they had some detailing that looks like it was designed around the image. and so they carry across really well. The chrome-like finish of the card front works pretty well, and the reason that it works well is because down at the bottom, the way that the gold bricks or whatever they were going for down there, it works really well with the rest of the cards, so it all reads well. Then for the inserts, the first insert they had was Second Season, and if you're curious what Second Season refers to, I am too. I really don't know why they chose the name, but the whole point of this set is it's a look back at the previous year. So it's not a week-by-week chronology, but you have regular season events and you have postseason events, and that's basically the card design. The cards themselves have kind of a gold background that fades down into an image of the background with the player in front, and it's not that alluring of a card. It's an okay card set, but it's one of those card sets that makes you think that they really hadn't figured out what they were going to do. Fortunately, this was the only card where they had that problem. Rookie Roundup, on the other hand, used the Dufex technology, and it used the Dufex technology to almost the perfect level. This is an extremely flashy card. They used the color of the team as the main theme in the background, and they have a foil of that color of the star in the middle, and then the Dufex is around it in a very energetic pattern. And the way that all of that works is this is a very, very lively card, so it's a lot of fun to look at. It's a card that you really do want to hold in your hand and move around and enjoy the design work that they had. And the card back is even livelier. It's a really big, fun affair. So these cards are a blast. Z-Team was also designed similarly. Here they got way too carried away with the Dufex technology and throwing a bunch of stuff in there. I don't say this is a bad thing. I love this card. It's just that where the rookie stands out really well in Rookie Roundup, or again, the previous year's rookie, in this card, the player kind of blends in with the rest of the card and you don't really get to see him, which is fine because the whole card is really exciting and really fun, but it's not a card that's designed around the player. It's a card designed around the card, and the player happens to be on it. And then on the back, they have a gold foil treatment of the back, which is pretty garish, but that's what's on the back. It's a fun card back. It's an interesting card back. It's just not a very alluring card back. So for 1996, they decided that they were going to have to go ahead and do parallels. And they wanted to go with the Pinnacle theme that they did for Parallels, which was artist proof. So this year, they really did a good job with the card design. Basically, they have a black card, like the previous year, but instead of stuffing all of the design work down the bottom, they put a football right in the middle. Again, it's a gold football. And because the black almost entirely circles the football, it's like the card has a border. And that's a really good idea that they went with. And then everything's a little bit toned down so that the player still stands out really well. And the combination of this makes a well-balanced and a very, very elegant looking card. This is a card that looks fantastic. This is exactly what Zenith is supposed to look like. And they had some gold detailing on it. And with the parallel, the artist proof parallel, they changed all the gold detailing to bronze, and then they just put a little emblem down in the corner. That's the only thing that they did. They didn't do anything on the card back. It's just that difference. The card backs themselves are still pretty bad. They're a little bit better than the previous year, but they're I don't know what they were thinking with these cards. For the rookies, or again, the previous year's rookies, for the cards that say rookie on them, they moved the football almost entirely off to the side, and then they put a big moon up in the corner so that the player is actually surrounded almost entirely by black. And this was a really good technique that they used because it heightened the interest in the player. The player stood out in a much more focused manner. And I like that quality about it. In fact, I really wish that these had been rookies because these would have been easily among the best rookie cards for each one of these players. It didn't work out that way, but as far as this set goes, these cards do look fantastic. On the card back looks a lot better too. Here they changed the text box from green to blue, and with the write-up as opposed to the take on stats that they did, that looks a lot better, even if the image on the card back doesn't necessarily look as good. But overall, I like these cards a lot better than the main cards, which is saying a lot because I really like the main cards. And then they have a subset, and the subset it's kind of a confusing subset because it's called proof positive. And so if you're trying to get the parallels, which are artist proof, you got to remember that when you see one of these cards that says proof positive, it's not the same thing as artist proof. The proof positive cards do have artist proof versions of them, but I do find myself every once in a while forgetting and getting a proof positive card only to realize that that's not what I wanted. So do keep in mind, proof positive is just a subset. It's not a parallel. These cards are, they're not very well designed. I mean, at the end of the day, they're actually pretty decent cards, but they don't have interest to them because they're basically, they're very similar to just a full bleed card, which doesn't really work well with the nature of how these Zenith cards are designed. I do like the big emblem, especially when they shifted over to the artist proof version. But other than that, there's not a lot that really intrigues you about these cards, in part because they're designed more like the insert cards from the previous year, the second season cards, than being really an integral part of these otherwise really, really well-designed cards. They also had a tribute to the Dallas Cowboy triplets, which is basically Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, and Michael Irvin. It's one card, and it's horizontal. It's very different in design, so it breaks up the set quite nicely, and I like it for that reason. But the checklists are, this is the way that I like checklists to be done. To be done with a player on it, so that it makes the checklist interesting and collectible. And these are very well designed card fronts because, again, virtually the entire card set here in 1996 looks fantastic. As for the inserts, the first insert is Noteworthy 95, and this, like second season the previous year, this is a look at the whole season. And these cards are actually kind of interesting. There is a gold tone image down at the bottom, and then there's kind of a holofoil background behind the player with a subset name running across it. And the cards aren't really all that engaging, but they do look pretty good. And I like the card back. And then they have the Rookie Rising, and the Rookie Rising again is Dufex. This is a better design for Dufex than the previous year. In the previous year, we had one card that was really well designed with a very flashy quality, and another one that was overly designed. Both of them were really great. Here, it's a lot more mature. It's also a little bit more colorful than in the previous year. But it's a great design, and to me this is kind of the right design for a Zenith card to have, a Zenith insert card. And the card back is also extremely lively and a lot of fun. Then they have the Z-Team card, and the Z-Team card they played around with. It's partially a plastic acetate-like card. It's a really interesting design that they did because they have this big Z, and then in the cavities on either side of the Z they have clear plastic with kind of a radial pattern with some what's kind of like Dufex. It's basically like some refractive panels in it, and it's a really neat card that they created, especially with the way that the player integrates within it all, primarily when you turn the card over and the player's actually popping out from the Z. It's a cool idea, and it's a very unique thing that they came up with, which makes it a lot more fun. And I also like on the card back the way that they have the text going down the middle of the Z. So to me, this is kind of the main grown-up card of this whole set, simply because I think that it's the best designed, the best conceived, the best designed, and the most unique card. So for 1997, they decided to continue with what they'd done in 96, but they decided not to go with the refined design work that they did. Instead, they wanted to really lean heavily into the parallel, and they stripped down the main card. They kind of blocked it up. So it's similar to what SP did from 93 to 94, where they started off with a very intricate card in 93, and then in 94, they made it a very blocky, blunt instrument type of a card design. Here they did very much the same thing. So for the 97 set, they have a background that's, I guess it's kind of like a spotlight right in the middle with, you know, background image for the player. And then there's some streaks along the side, which I assume is like the spotlight light coming in. I really don't know, but I think that's what they were going for. And it's not intriguing. It's not interesting. This is one of those card sets you collect for the parallel, not because of how great the parallels look, but because you're trying to collect the main set in the parallel. It's fun in that regard. It's not, these cards don't have the individual appearance that 95 and 96 had, where they could stand on their own. Here they just don't. But the parallel does look pretty good, where they replace all of the gold tone with kind of a silver holofoil effect. And the gold detailing on the card also gets replaced by pretty much the same thing. So that's kind of what they did with the card design. And the card backs, I think they look a little bit better, but it's, you know, none of these card backs look good in the main set. They also, for their rookie cards, here they had a much better design because they got rid of that spotlight thing and they actually put a helmet back there. Now, it is kitsch, it is bold, but at least there's an interest to it. And that's what I like about these particular cards here. So it looks a little bit better, especially when you get to the holofoil version, the artist-proof version, because there it has more of an intrigue the way that it all works. So that's nice. But they also did a subset, which was they took the season review cards out of the inserts, and here they actually put it into the set, calling it season highlights. So these cards basically they do the same thing. These are designed more like the 95 rookies. And the image, they have kind of like a newsprint dot pattern for the background, which it's an interesting approach they went with. The cards aren't really all that interesting on their own, but it's kind of an interesting idea that they went with. And I actually kind of like the card backs, because it's not that the card backs are great, but they're a little bit better than all the other card backs in the main sets. And they're very different. And that's really kind of the thing, is that this is kind of like a refreshing sight of something that just looks different. So props to them for that. They also had a card in the set looking at it's called Awesome Foursome, and it looks at the 4 main offensive rookies from the previous year. And this card it's another one of those full bleed cards that it looks pretty good. I like the way that this looks. It has kind of a good interest to it, primarily because of the picture that they used. And on the card back, there's some interest to the way that the card back's laid out. So I like this a lot, and it does have an artist-proof version. Basically, all of these do. And then they again did the checklist with the players on the front. So that was basically the set. Now for the inserts, they started off, since they weren't doing the season in review kind of insert, they instead went with V2. And the V2 set, there are actually 2 different V2 insert sets. This one and then another one in Pinnacle Inscriptions. I believe it's in Inscriptions. And with the Inscriptions one, everything's kind of shifted like it's in motion. Here it's all very blocky, and it's perfectly symmetrical. So that's the main way you can tell. If you want to look for the Zenith ones, you're looking for the one where everything is symmetrical on the card. It's not an interesting card other than the different feel that it has, the different layout that it has, and it has a lenticular card theme, basically a design element that's lenticular inside of it, that I never once looked at these cards until I was prepping this video, and I was curious what the lenticular pattern was. And basically it's kind of like a rotational shot around the player. That's what is in there, but I never had any interest in looking at these cards. They're that benign. And interestingly, all of the inserts in this set are all horizontal. And with each one of the cards, the way that you go from the front to the back is you flip them like this. It's an interesting thing they do, because normally you flip them in a vertical fashion. Here you flip them along the horizontal axis. So it's an odd thing that they went with, but it's what they went with. As for the Rookie Rising cards, these to me are the best Dufex technology cards that they may have created, period. They're not as much fun as the previous 2 years, but this is like the grown-up version of these cards. It's all gold tone, gold to black tone, and the way that all of the elements in there are designed in there, the stadium, all of that is very well thought out. It's very well crafted, and there's kind of a calm to these cards that I like. And so that's why I feel like they're the most mature of all of these cards. The back doesn't have the same interest that the other ones had, but this is, well, to me, this is the set that you get out of the way before you go off and you have the fun with the previous years, which in my personal case, that's kind of how it worked out anyway. And then with Z-Team was a major step down from the previous years. Here they stripped away all of the things that made it really engaging, and they went with a very, very simplistic approach. They have the Dufex technology on it, which is kind of interesting, but it's not really all that intriguing. But what's really kind of interesting is the fact that they have a cover over it, like what they did with Finest. And it doesn't really make sense with these cards why they have it, but these cards have a parallel, which is a mirror gold surface. And with that, it makes sense that they would have the peel off protector over it. And so I guess that they did it in both cards for continuity, whatever the reason. But with these cards, I do want to talk about promos. Now, normally I avoid talking about promos in these card videos because I don't want to waste a lot of time. But in this case, I do want to talk about the promos because there are only 3 players, and those 3 players have the same, it's not the rest of the set, it's just the Z Team cards. Those are the only promos they did. But with these 3 cards, they did a different take on the Z Team, and I wish that they'd done the take. I'm good with the silver and the gold of what was in the set, but these cards are a lot more fun. They're a lot more lively. They have a lot of color in them, and the way that the Dufex technology works is it has a livelier quality that draws your eye, and you have more fun with it. But also, the Parallel was a refractor version as opposed to a gold version. Now, the foil does change between the two. So all of the foil on the main promo card is in copper, and the Parallel, it's all in gold. That's the most effective way that you can tell the difference between them, because it doesn't say on the back, nothing like that. But the other thing is that the refractor quality within the Dufex has a really neat quality that makes me wish that they'd done the whole set like this. I do think that that was kind of a letdown, but those 3 cards exist, and the reason I wanted to talk about them was mainly so that you know the difference between them. But that was what they did for Zenith. They never got around to a 98 because Pinnacle wasn't around in 98 to make these cards. And I'm not all that curious what they would have done in 98 because 97 was a huge letdown. Oftentimes you'll have a card set, a brand that will work really well for 2 years, and then the 3rd year they just kind of fall apart. And that's kind of what they did here. They had some good ideas, but for the most part they were getting down to more running through the numbers. They didn't have the rich liveliness of the inspiration that came into the first 2 years. I like 95, I love 96. And 97 is there to be collected. That's kind of my take. Now, I'll be looking at other sets as we go along, so you can see the different ways that Score was exploring the mid to late 90s. But this is basically what they did for Zenith. This is the entire run of Zenith. But I hope that you learned something from all this. I hope that it was entertaining. I hope that you'll check out other videos that I've done. And thank you very much for watching.